Hello and welcome to S.T.A.R Productions, spiritually trained and renewed productions. Today I have with me a guest that you would want to see. Her name is Tandy Turk. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Hey and welcome back. Max with S.T.A.R Productions, spiritually trained and renewed productions. I have with me the one and only Tandy Turk.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
So this woman is extraordinary, and later on you'll see why. She is a fashion designer, she's a poet, she's a musician, I'm trying to catch my breath, she is an illustrator, she is a performing artist, and she has a way of combining a few of these things to make herself very memorable. Tandy, for a lot of my audience members who don't know who you are, could you tell them who is Tandy Turk?
Tandy Turk. I'm an artist that's discovering my limitless and infinite potential. An artist that used to keep everything to herself, and I'm discovering a bridge, a way to gap the bridge from my fantasy world and getting everything out there to actually putting on full-on productions and interweaving things that I used to think were not possible at all.
Wow. Wow, fantastic. Now, I know that Tandy Turk has a company called, or should we call it a line? Well, it's called Tandyland Productions, and I'm curious to find out what it's all about. Could you tell us a little bit about Tandyland Productions? It almost made me feel like La La Land, your own space, your own world. Tell us a little bit about Tandyland Productions.
Yes, to tell you about Tandyland Productions, I have to tell you about Tandyland, the place first.
Okay.
So it is a place that I've spent most of my life in my dream world, you know. I think it's connected to my subconscious, my unconscious. It's where all of my artwork is created. I have all my art comes through dreams or visions. I hear music. It all comes from Tandyland. And the characters that come out of Tandyland, whether it's through the models and the fashion lines or through the characters and the stories that I tell, I say are different parts of myself. So they represent, Tandyland is the land of all the Tandys.
Wow.
And I'm trying to acknowledge the parts of myself that I used to hate or that I couldn't ever accept.
Wow.
And give them a platform and a stage and a medium of art to tell their story, because I've realized that I hated them for reasons that it was all an illusion, and so me coming forth and like gathering these fractured parts of myself and letting them speak, I'm able to become more of a whole person. So that's what Tandyland is, the place of Tandyland. And I went for 1 week. I told myself I was going to go to Tandyland. I was getting on a plane, and while I was there, I was going to have to adopt the customs and rules of Tandyland. And I could always come back to real life, but I had to be there for a week. And during that 1 week, I told myself I couldn't do any self-destructive or self-sabotage behaviors, and all I could do is say yes to the things that I didn't believe I could do, just to see what happens. And in that week, I got my first fashion show. I joined the circus here in Nashville called Beyond Wing Circus. During that week literally started where I am today with my career and where I'm going. So.
Wow, that's fascinating, fascinating. So Tandy, on your Facebook page, I noticed a quote that left me very content. On your Facebook page, the intro page says, when it says intro, usually people talk about who they are, what they do, and one of the lines there says, play for a living. I really, really like that line. Could you tell us, what do you mean by that? You play for a living.
I feel like there was definitely a point in my life where I wasn't playing, and I thought I could get the best out of myself by discipline, and just like it came out of more hatred, you know, and it actually was a self-fulfilling prophecy, more so of not getting the things done. And I've just found that when I approach things with playfulness and lightfulness, that's where I get in touch with my imagination and things just start to soar. I mean, it means literally too, like play music for a living. It means play as a clown, be a clown, or in the circus and perform and playing as a living. I mean, you could branch it out to any kind of meaning.
Nice. You know, that reminds me of the line that they often says, if you're doing what you love, you'll never work another day in your life. Everything seems fun when you're doing what you love. When I saw that line, that's what I thought about. So I'm glad you explained that. The next thing I want to ask you is, you are a performing artist, you're an illustrator, you are a fashion designer, you are a poet, you're a musician, and I just discovered you're part of the circus as well. Did these passions, did they come out naturally, or did they come out as a result of you going to school? Were they always there innately? And how did you discover them?
Well, the funny thing is about my fashion designs, which is sculptural and using non-traditional materials and objects. The funny thing about that is that I was homeschooled for 7 years of my life, growing up from 1st until 8th grade. And whenever my mom would leave the room and expect us to do our schoolwork, she would come back and I would have taken apart all of the recycled stuff and turned it, and I would be, walking around with all these boxes on me. Or I used to make hats and shoes out of duct tape. I was always using non-traditional materials and objects to clothe myself. And so really today I'm not doing anything different in that genre with fashion. And anything I ever did, I was always turning into a song. Whenever I would do my homeschool projects at home, I would talk in different voices to make it more entertaining and make it interesting for me to read history, and things that I didn't like so much, I could always put a twist on it. I would make up a song about cleaning out the car when I had that as a chore, or it's really stuff I've always been doing, except for until I stopped at a certain point when things happened in my life that I disconnected from myself and my passions.
Now, you went to Savannah College of Design and
Art and Design, yes.
Arts and Design. Did you go to school because you realized you had those innate abilities and you wanted to take them to the next level, or did you discover them in school?
I originally started going to school in Tennessee at this place, and then my parents had an intervention with me, and I had to go to treatment for an eating disorder. And during my time there, I kind of got to know more of my authentic self. So I rediscovered that I do have this passion for art, and I need to acknowledge that it's there, because it's gonna drive me crazy if I don't find the right mediums to get out what I have to say, because I had a lot to say, from my experiences. And so, but when I went to SCAD, I originally just went for creative writing, because I was still under this limited perception of what I could do. I was being timid. Oh, I'll just write, that's it. I didn't think I had any other talents yet. But while I was there, my friends started taking note of my sense of fashion, and they're like, why don't you get into fashion design? Just take a class, check it out. And so I did that. And then I realized that, because I didn't really have a passion for just making clothes for people to wear, I realized how I could incorporate the elements of storytelling and literary devices into my garments to make a collection that tell a story that's way more significant and meaningful for my viewers, to tell the story that I need to tell, and ultimately leading up to interweaving all of my passions and talents together to make an even fuller and multi-dimensional production.
And I got to tell you, you do a stupendous job at storytelling and fashion. I'm a witness. I saw her in action, and you'll get a chance to see that in a little bit. We'll talk about that some more. I primarily have known you as a fashion designer. Through our connection, there was one fashion show in town last year. I got introduced to your brand that way. My daughter walked for your line, which was super cool. And then again, this past weekend, the Southern Women in Film and Television were having an event, and you were one of the designers there. Your collection is not just, like you said, just showing clothes. There's a whole story that you're telling. And not only that, you are singing. You're behind the mic, you're singing. Your poetry comes into place because the words are pretty deep in your song, and at the same time, the clothing itself is telling its own story. What is it, Prisoners of the Past?
Prisoners of the Past is the name of the production, and then there's Defense, and then so Bondage, Defense, Projection, and Consumed are the four.
There you go, there you go. Would you tell us a little bit about each of these? Because when I heard you starting talking about your line, your collection line, and the stories behind those designs, I felt like you were telling something so powerful. And you magnificently talked about your past and how you've been a prisoner. If you would help us understand more about those lines and the stories behind them.
Okay. Well, first of all, I did say I'm referring to perpetrators as male and the victims or prisoners female because each of the looks are projections of my personal past and what I personally experienced. So I like to use that as a disclaimer. So because perpetrators can be male or female,
Sure.
and victims can be male or female. So I just like to get that clear for sure. So yeah, with fashion in this particular collection, definitely, I'm kind of turning fashion inside out, and so it's revealing more of the guts and of the model, and using the body as a canvas to paint like what's happening emotionally in this body and psychologically. I kind of turn it inside out. So this collection, PTSD Prisoners of the Past, is commenting on sexual abuse, rape, and the ways that it can fabricate a victim's identity and create her reality if these things never go addressed. The ways that it can warp someone's beliefs and change their entire framework of perception of how they see the world, which in turn creates one's reality. So in the collection, I'm trying to show the reasons why it is so important to go into the past and address these issues, and showing that by the collection itself, what it can do to the prisoner, and for people to recognize that it's really serving as a mirror for them to, when they come out and they see how they're in bondage to their past, for them to be like, oh, that resonates with me, actually. And it creates a mirror, and then vicariously can go through each model to go back into those dark rooms and start to process and develop and understand why it's important. And so everything is done with film strips and reels to kind of, it's ultimately the metaphor is to go into the dark room of your past and begin to take these solutions that I'm providing through my production, to shatter the illusions, to reverse the negative past effects, to fully develop, to mix in the solutions, to expose it to light by sharing your stories with other people, and eventually becoming detached from the frames and finding freedom from the chains of your past. And so the collection itself of the fashion doesn't really provide an answer or a solution to the problem. It's more so revealing ways in which you can remain prisoners to the past. So each one is defense mechanisms. So this is highlighting defense mechanisms such as dissociating and getting outside of oneself to not remember the pain that happened to one's body. A lot of survivors or victims dissociate a lot to, the body is not a safe place. It's where I was hurt. It was where things happened to me. It doesn't feel good to have those memories. So a lot of victims leave their bodies often, and it's revealing that. It's also revealing kind of what I talked about with Tandyland Productions, going into this land and unlocking these parts of myself that I never would allow light to shine on them. So this particular look is defense. It's also meaning fences, like creating a frame of cell by cell of different women illustrations that I use that are inside of a cell by cell, frame by frame, that's screaming to get out with a story to tell.
Wow. Trapped
in their unconscious, and whether she decides to tell the story or not, they're gonna tell their stories in another way. And so that one's on kind of compartmentalizing, dissociation, and those defense mechanisms. Oh, she's also like in denial. She's got a real headpiece with a veil, kind of to defend herself from not seeing the things that are really hard to see. Roses and films twisted into roses to kind of show that the things are really rosy, and that's one of the looks.
And then you have another look called before I go to bondage. The one before bondage was Projection.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about projection.
That is a really heavy and dense concept into that one. The whole the whole projection's whole look is alluding to a short story called The Yellow Wallpaper, in which the narrator is basically projecting her issues into the wallpaper in her room, and she's talking about these absurd patterns, and then she starts to see herself. She starts to see women in bars behind the wallpaper, stuck in the patterns on the walls, and then she starts to believe she came out of the pattern, and she goes crazy, and she's like trying to rip off the patterns. And so I kind of applied that to my experience with sexual abuse and using the crazy, insane patterns in parallel to relationship patterns and dynamics that can happen to a victim of sexual abuse, meaning they're called reenactments. And so a lot of times when victims aren't able to process everything that happened to them, process the emotions that went with it, then a lot of times they can be projected out into current reality in order to resolve all of those emotions that played a part in it, to kind of get the power back or whatever, so it's almost recreating the trauma all over again. And with my experience, I noticed those patterns. I was getting into these relationship patterns, these toxic or abusive relationship patterns, especially with people that were more powerful than me, for me to like resort back to this powerless part of myself and getting taken advantage of again. And so this look is the way that I'm telling that story, is I've taken 3 different illustrations that depict powerlessness to me, 3 illustrations that I drew. And I took newspaper articles of sexual abuse, rape, and headlines, and I collaged them with Mod Podge all together. So there's eyes and faces, and then there's what I call a human charger that I drew of a girl tied up with different plugs here and between her legs. So it's very much powerlessness, and collaged all of them together and sewed them to strips of fabric and sewed on top spirals and X marks, and then took a knife and slashed into them and extracted the gauze painted blood red that I put in, and the wounds, kind of showing also that the wounds that we don't go back and attend to were bleeding out and attracting more predators. Wow. Not to say it's ever a victim's fault ever, but it's just showing that this is the message of what's behind these patterns, why these patterns keep reoccurring in our lives, why, as the projector of our story, she's reeled into these storylines, and that's why it keeps happening, because there's something in the past that needs to be addressed to work through. Wow. So that's projection.
And then we got 2 more looks. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Caribbean Desire special of the day, legume, also known as vegetable stew. Add some white rice to that and some baked chicken. Decorating with some pickles. Ooh, get your corporate order in today. Call us or email us, Caribbean Desire, a meal and a message.
All right, welcome back. This is S.T.A.R Productions, and we are right now in Tandy Land. My guest, fashion designer Tandy Turk, is telling us a little bit about the stories behind her fashion line. We've already talked about defense mechanism, projection, and now we're going to talk a little bit about bondage. Please tell us what that is about.
Yes. Bondage's look is to reveal the ways in which a victim can become bonded to her perpetrator, and the ways in which basically, yeah, she's bonded to him, and why victims a lot of times don't talk or don't tell their stories. And revealing also, because what helped me a lot to get out of my past with sexual abuse and see my perpetrator as a perpetrator, because most of my life I saw myself as just as bad as him, and I needed to go to prison as long as he did, because I was so loyal to him, because I guess these trauma bonds that happened growing up. And so the whole look is on kind of grooming and planting seeds into really innocent children's heads, to kind of sculpt and groom them into doing the things that adult wants to do, and making it feel like they're a safe person to be around by giving them the things that they want, saying everything that every little girl wants to hear, hitting on those points, and creating attachments and bonds.
So the perpetrator created a world. It's almost like you were very dependent on them, and needed them. And they created a world where it seems like they make you feel safe. It's almost like if you're not with them, you're not totally yourself, so you kind of still slave to them in a way. Is that where bondage, that's the idea there?
Yeah, and the manipulation going through. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of times, a lot of perpetrators are people that are in the family or family friends, and they insert themselves into the child's parents' lives or whatever, and get them involved to think that they're a good person too. That he like he bonds with them too, you know, to make it very much so least likely that he would be a perpetrator, which is a lot of my story. So for this particular look, Bondage, some of the film strips that I used are actual tutorials of sculpting. And so if you look really closely into each frame, you'll see images of sculpting. You'll see some negatives are of me at the time, the age of the grooming that was happening. If you look closely in some of the places that it was happening. And then there's also another side to Bondage. These are so conceptual and like abstract in ways that I have a hard time talking about it unless I have what I've written out in front of me, but I will try. The other piece is also the programming that can go into one's arousal templates, sexual arousal templates, and convincing the young girl that she likes it. You know, it can be very, very confusing to interpret the events that happen, especially from a society that says, you know, these things are bad, but they never talk about a human's natural response to sexual things, even if their child is sometimes. Some victims might have an orgasm, or some might get wet, and that makes them question, well, if I did that, then I'm just as bad as him. If I liked
That's
it.
a
And
good
so
point.
it's commenting on that, because nobody ever told me that it's a human natural response, even can be triggered by fear. And so it doesn't matter if someone has those physiological responses. It still doesn't mean it's consensual. It still doesn't mean. But I interpret it that way, and I told myself, if I am already as bad as him, then I kind of submitted to that. I'm just a bad person, and so I kind of became more promiscuous after it, and I told myself that I liked it. And that's what he would tell me too, you know, that I liked it, and kind of convinced me. And what I realized, that by romanticizing the good times all the good things that he did for me, like the acts of kindness to kind of reel me in, by only romanticizing those parts and minimizing the abuse that happened, I became even more bonded to him over the years. And those acts, and it wasn't until I really, really went for like 10 months and really processed all of this stuff that, and wasn't in any sexual kind of relationship for 10 months, that I started to rewire that arousal template. And I realized that I never liked it. I never liked it. I never deserved it. I realized that all of those mind games and the tricks and the programming that I was subjected to. And so that's what bondage is. Yeah.
And when I watched the bondage outfit, it almost feels like the model was empowered at the time. Or maybe it's the way the model displayed it. It felt to me as if she broke loose somehow. When she took the whip and splashed it a couple of times, it almost felt like she's gained power. Almost like she's freed from that perpetrator, and now she's in charge. At least that's how I read it. You know, she broke free and broke loose from that place. Powerful, powerful. And then finally, Consumed. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Consumed was a really, really difficult and very therapeutic process piece. Consumed is, I went into places of my past, some of the actual places that events happened, and some that are representative of those places. And I took a bunch of disposable cameras and took pictures of those actual places. So some of the examples include, I actually went to the house of my childhood perpetrator I took a picture of his house. I took a picture from the internet of his mugshot from when he was incarcerated. I went to some of the places that things happened with him, took pictures of those. I went to a couple of college campuses as representation of where I was raped when I was 18, and another place where I was raped when I was 16. And then I also did some shots with a friend to kind of reenact it for this particular shot. Some are Google images I found of like rats and snakes that are representative of the nightmares that I've had in response to sexual abuse and rape. It's supposed to show what it's the consuming effect of sexual abuse, and specifically having flashbacks and nightmares and key reactions with PTSD. So it's really showing those times and the scenes that I was consumed by, and I couldn't see past it, you know. And there's a trail of footage that I take with every step that goes with me. She is also wearing a skirt, and there's an outer layer of the skirt, like a shell that's made out of film strips. I was inspired by a hobble skirt from like I can't remember what century, but it impedes someone's walking, and so she has to hobble everywhere she goes. Because she's consumed by her past. So yeah, that piece was very, very hard for me and very freeing, because a lot of those places that those events happen, I have to go by frequently, close to home. And so all the other times I would go past them, and it still consumed me, and I would have, they were triggers, they would take me back there to this powerless place. And this particular time, when going there I was the one choosing to go there. I was going back there. I was in the power. And so now when I go past there, I feel like I've overcome it, because I did that, and then I printed it on my friend's big Epson printer, and watched them slowly come out and develop. There were negative frames that I printed of them. So yeah, it was very, very powerful. It took 10 hours to print all of those and let them dry. So it was like I was literally going into a dark room and processing them when I was creating it.
My goodness.
So,
Powerful. If obviously you've used something negative that somebody has done to you as a child, or even as a young woman growing up, things that's happened that's been negative and could have destroyed you, but overcame, what would you say to you got somebody who's watching you right now, and they're deep down, they're drowning in pain. Maybe they're not as devoted or strong as you to come out of this and find ways to break free from it. And they're deep in that place right now of being overwhelmed and not knowing, how do I get out of this? Maybe the young child that's 10 watching us right now want to get out of this. What would you say to them right now?
I hope that they can see through me that it's possible. It's possible to overcome it. And really second guess any stories that you've been told or stories that you're buying into. And really, if you're in a position where you don't know who to talk to about, if there's no one that you are close to that is safe to talk to, because a lot of times that is the situation, then find somebody that you trust and will listen to you. And I know it's really, really scary, and because it could change your life, and it will change your life to tell somebody. And it might seem so scary at the beginning, but 10 years down the road, you're gonna be so glad that you made that choice. And sometimes to rebuild a life that you want, it takes destroying something. It takes knocking something down. And also to discover the foundation of who you really are. it takes a lot of deconstruction to find the core of yourself that is light that you never thought might have been light. And so it's really deconstructing that shame and finding the core of yourself.
Wow. How are you feeling now? Are you in a better place now that you've been able to release that through the arts that you've used? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling like anything can come true. I'm just feeling and I'm witnessing the effects of, even if I don't believe that I deserve something, even if I don't think that I'm worthy, if I just act opposite, that I attract those things that I didn't think, you know? And so a lot of the way that I do things is acting opposite of what I initially think. I don't want to do that because I might have a core belief that says I'm not capable of it, or I'm inadequate, or I'm not enough, or I'm not worth it, I don't deserve it. And if I wasn't, then it wouldn't be happening, you know? And so I really challenge myself to act opposite, and I surprises myself every time. And then I'm showered with gifts that I never thought that I deserved. It's a way of forcing me to open up and receive and heal. And but yeah, absolutely, I feel like such a light right now, and I have so much to help with other people. My way of doing this was very unique and to my story, and someone else's might have another production on the way. And it just requires them recognizing the light within themselves and separating them from the shame in order to get to the gold, basically, and manifest their dreams into reality. I think anything is possible for anyone.
Wow. How has therapy helped you with this process?
Therapy has had a lot to do with it.
Because I've asked that because I'm in the healing field as a speaker, and it's funny to me, I would hear over and over again people telling people to just get over it, or just snap out of it, not recognizing that sometimes it takes a journey and a process to get over something. It doesn't just happen. And the importance of therapy, I believe in it. Our family, we're big into getting the proper care that you need to come out of something. And I would love for you to talk about that, because a lot of time people don't think, people just want you to snap out of things that really cannot be snapped out automatically. So how has therapy helped you?
A lot of our society is in denial of these things, and a lot of people's reactions and responses might be to get over it. And a lot of times it's because they might have something themselves that they don't want to bring up. And so a lot of times that's those people's reactions. And that's why I also say be careful of who you talk to about these things, because if they say get over it or whatever, it just reconfirms those things that there's not enough space for me, there's not, all the shameful core beliefs, and kind of reconfirms that.
That's powerful. Something you said here that just caught me. Sometimes the person saying get over it has not found a way to get over it themselves. And they just deal with their reality and thinking that should be everybody else's reality. When in reality, there could be another way of going about it. Wow. If your perpetrator was watching the show right now, if they were watching, what would you say to them? Looking up straight at them, what is your message? Take your time.
I don't wish him any harm. I just wish him healing, really, for whatever pain he went through that caused him to deflect it onto me and the other people that experience. And I hope that he realizes what an impact it makes on someone's life, and how it completely turns their life around and touches the deepest part of anyone. Anyone that's watching this that is doing acts like that, I hope that it shows that it turns your life around completely.
Have you been able to
touches
forgive?
parts I'm healed, but there's residue. There's still residue. I'm sure that there's parts that it's touched me that I haven't even gotten to yet. Too. I'm always healing. Do it.
Have you been able to forgive him?
I think so. In that I recognize he probably did those acts out of a place of hurt himself. So I can see that.
It's funny you said that. They often say, oh, it's not funny. It's interesting you said that. They often say that hurt people hurt people. And it would be interesting to look at his past to see how he has taken this with him to hurt somebody else. And of course, if you had not dealt with it, chances are you probably would hurt yourself and hurt somebody else.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was doing when I got to really low points. I'm sure I hurt people, because hurt people do hurt people, and so that's why I also think it's so important to go address all of these wounds as a collective, because it's the source of a lot of problems. It's the source of addictions. It's a source of the reenactments of why it's continuing the cycles. It's the source of transmitting it to the next generations if it's not addressed, and it's just the continuation. So why not address it now?
It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
It's funny. I keep saying funny. It's interesting you mentioned that. Not funny in the sense of funny. You mentioned that when people are hurt and it's not dealt with, oftentimes as a result, they project that pain onto something else. They might get into heavy drinking. They might get into a life of promiscuity. Or maybe sometimes people go into gangs. Whatever the deal is. What was the result for you? Unhealed. What did that push you into?
Eating disorder. I went through various forms of it throughout the years. So I was bulimic for a while, which everything about an eating disorder is so metaphorical if you look into it. I was stuffing the feelings down that I didn't want to have to re-experience or endure, and then when I was throwing things up, it was another way to vomit out everything that I needed to say, without having to really go there, and just cycle after cycle of, or not eating, I didn't want to put anything in my mouth after things had been in my mouth that shouldn't have been in my mouth. I couldn't swallow down. I couldn't take that stuff in. It all tells the story if you really look at what an eating disorder is.
Wow.
And then I went through periods of just anorexia and went to treatment several times for that. It also showed up through promiscuity for sure, and created times through that were more traumatizing, and other situations I was re-victimized too, and that's what a lot of the projection piece my collection is talking about. It showed up definitely, I'm sure, with alcohol abuse, which also just ended up in more situations where people could take advantage of me again. I had several different outcomes from it. Different ways.
Which brings me to this point, because I know you've had your recovery journey, which is always the bright light at the end of the tunnel. But it begs to repeat that whomever you might be out there who's taking somebody's future away by abusing them sexually, physically, verbally, you gotta think about what you're doing here. You're not just stopping someone right now. You're not just abusing someone right now. it may take years, and it has taken years for a lot of people to recover from your act of violence and your act of selfishness and your act of pain and your act of hurt. So before you try to hurt somebody else, ask yourself, what can I do to get help? And I'll leave it as that. But the good news is you've had your recovery and you've been able to transform a lot of that pain into art. The kind of art that I went to see, and I was so enthralled by what I saw. It was just beautiful. It wasn't just fashion show, it was speaking to me deep inside. Recovery is a good thing. And a lot of people don't realize you gotta have that recovery journey. And it's continuous. It's not just something you wake up the next day and you're completely there.
Yeah.
It's a continuous process, and you gotta keep feeding yourself those positive things to stay in that positive path. We'll be right back. Stay there. All right, welcome back to S.T.A.R Productions. I'm Max Desir. My guest today is the fabulous musician, poet, illustrator, fashion designer, Tandy Turk. So we just came back from a heavy moment, and I wanted you to tell us, where are you now in life? Are you completely freed from his power, the perpetrator, in this case a man, his power over your life?
I think so, for the most part. Like we said in the last shoot, I'm constantly healing. I'm constantly rediscovering other parts in ways that I was touched, and I'm still processing. There's residue still, but for the most part, I feel very free and very excited. And I'm still healing. It's every time I do this production again, it's re-exposure, it's reprocessing. I develop even, and it's like, it goes straight along with the production too, because every time I get a new gig for it, I'm constantly evolving it and making it better. And it's kind of showing you how I'm also still processing and further developing it too, with my healing experience. Like this past time, both my brother and my sister and my parents were able to come to this fashion show. And my past experience messed up my family a lot and fractured our whole family. And so it was very healing, and I was pretty tearful of being able to have my brother there, because it really affected him. He blamed himself for years after. And so for us to all kind of process it as a family, and them to see me on the other side of it has been so healing.
Fantastic.
Too. So
Fantastic.
yeah.
Fantastic. I'm very happy to hear that. You are constantly going to remain in my thoughts and my prayers and my mind, because not only do I want your line to go further, the stories to be told, but also your story as a person to inspire even more as you keep looking for it, you keep increasing or enhancing your healing. All right, how do we follow all the things that you're doing? Because people would love to, go out to the next event, the next venue you're going to be in, and watch you do these things, because it's so much better to see it than explaining it. So tell us, how are we going to follow you to make sure we keep up with all things Tandyland Productions?
Well, the main source that you should follow probably is my Instagram, Tandyland Productions. And I'm currently in the middle of making a website, so that will come soon, and hopefully the domain will be tandylandproductions.com. I have Facebook, but it's more personal, and Tandyland Productions is solely my art, and I try to put all of my different arts up there. So that's definitely the best way to follow me and keep in touch.
So if they search Tandyland Productions, or do they search you by your name?
Oh, no,
on
yeah.
Facebook?
Oh, on Facebook you would search Tandy Turk.
Okay.
Instagram, Tandyland Productions. If you want to listen to my music, which I only have one song right now on Spotify, but there will be some soon, because I just finished this project. I'm going to go back to working on music for a little bit. That one, you can find me on Spotify or on cdbaby.com, and I'm under Tandy Space Land. Yes.
Twitter?
I don't have a Twitter.
No Twitter? Okay,
Not
just
yet.
checking. Cool. So we are going to put her information on the screen, and you know that you need to follow this woman and follow her story. There's a lot of healing that comes from that. I know I got mine when I went to see her show this past weekend, so you got to check her out. Are there any current project that I know you just finished a production this past weekend? What's new for Tandy?
Well, it's looking like from the Women in Film and Television show production that I did, I've met some different producers, so I've been meeting and talking with them about possibly doing a short films or a film/documentary/music video of PTSD prisoners of the past, and incorporating all of my art and all of the looks and all of my music and turning it into an actual film.
Okay, so we know how to contact you. We know how to keep in touch with you. Before we close, I tell people all the time, whomever I invite here, they didn't just wake up the next morning and boom, they're doing a show this past weekend. In your case, you know, you've had your set of struggles you had to go through to get where you are. So what has your journey, generally, what has that journey been like for you to get right where you are? Up and downs, valleys, mountains. Nothing was handed to you, obviously. You worked hard. And I want my younger guests to know, you know, the fact that we're sitting here talking about your endeavors that didn't just happen.
Patience, persistence, with the talents that I have, they didn't even necessarily come to me either. I mean, I think I was born with some talents, but I had to have the patience and the persistence to sit down hours and hours and learn how to actually do it. Practicing art, learning how to do fashion design and pattern making and there's so much that goes into that. And learning how to play different instruments, it's all been so much patience. I think anyone can learn an instrument, you just have to have the patience to work through it. A lot of courage. I mean, I was so inspired because I went to treatment and I met so many other women just like me, and I said something is wrong. Something is terribly wrong for this huge amount of women, this alarming amount of women, to have the same stories, and it's still happening. And so I stuck. That was my main motivation. If not for me, it was for me, or it was for them, and it was for the other women in my life, my relatives that have also experienced it, and other people. So and through that, I was able to peel the layers off and wipe the muck and the shame away from me and see that it wasn't me either. So it was very healing in that process too. Faith. I don't know, just really, I guess, opposite of what my beliefs tell me, that I'm small or that, you know, I'm inadequate or I'm incapable, is just giving it the benefit of the doubt and going forth with it, especially past that point of like, I don't know, because that's when it happens, right past then. Keep going, persistence. Yes.
That's good. That's good. I like it. What's the dream for you, Tandy? What's that place, what's that plateau that you're going for? What is that place when you reach it, you say, heck yeah, I've done it? Does that look like your show being on certain platform? Does it look like maybe your stories being told in different mediums, such as the documentary you got coming up? So what is the dream for you? Because every one of us has that place we want to take it, and that place where we want to say, I did it, Mom. What's the dream for you?
I think ultimately is to start an art collective and start an art movement of where I'm. I mean, I have so many answers to this question. But ultimately, I want to start taking this collection into treatment centers and also holding workshops with other women who have experienced eating disorders. And I have a whole collection that I haven't made yet, but I've illustrated and draped on eating disorders. So I hope to go into treatment centers and share my PTSD collection and then do workshops with women about the messages behind eating disorders. And so ultimately, when I work on that collection, I'm not just telling my story, but I'm telling hundreds of women's stories together. And I think that would be super powerful. And then ultimately, I'd also like to have turned the house that I grew up in into an art collective. And so each room is a different medium of art. So I'll have different artists come in, but we're all working on a big production together that's all about releasing the chains and shame, and it's all about, you know, what's best for the collective and meeting the collective's unmet needs, responding to the collective body's needs. Yeah,
that is pretty
healing.
cool.
So
Pretty cool. All right, so we're gonna close, and before we close, I let my guests have the last word. So if you had one last thing to say, whatever that comes to your heart, whatever you think it is, what would that be?
I hope that you can find courage within yourself from the stories I've said today, and see where I've come out on the other side, and give yourself the benefit of the doubt, and start to shatter the illusions that hold you back from being who you are and everything that you are capable of and have the potential to do and become, and don't let that deter you from manifesting your absolute dreams that you would never even talk about because you didn't think they were possible. Giving the benefit of the doubt to those dreams, to talk about them, because they are happening for me right now. So I definitely want to tell you that that you deserve it and you can do it.
Absolutely.
It's possible.
That's it. I couldn't have said it better. This is Max with S.T.A.R Productions, Spiritually Trained and Renewed Productions. I'll have all of our information down here for you to follow on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. My guest today is the fabulous fashion designer with a story, not just any, poet, musician, performing artist. What do you do with the circus?
I was doing acrobatic kind of body balancing, kind of like pyramid things. It's called hand-to-hand or acro, or some acro yoga. And then I was also doing trapeze, aerial arts, so trapeze.
So she's all that in a bag of chips. My guest today, Tandy Turk with Tandyland Productions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Y'all see you next time. Take care. This is Max with S.T.A.R Productions, Spiritually Trained and Renewed Productions, where it's not enough to be talented, you have to be spiritually trained and renewed. À bientôt.